So for today, we will use a couple of additional props. So just a little bit of background. Good morning, and thank you for joining me. This week has been a pretty special week because BKS Iyengar's granddaughter has been teaching live classes online. Although I did not register in time, both of my mentors did, and they've been sharing some information here and there, along with sharing some blog posts that talk a little bit more descriptively about what Abhijata has been talking about. BKS Iyengar is essentially the head of the lineage that I practice and that I teach, and so it's great when we get that insight from India directly, when usually we're passing it through teachers and everyone kind of has their different takeaway from it. So I've read a couple of blog articles about what they've been talking about and about the sequences they've been practicing. And we're going to dive and kind of skim the top into a few of those things today. We will be using some additional supports. I want today's class to be very supportive in the sense that you feel like you don't have to work very hard. And sometimes that does require some extra props in various situations. So I have a couple of blankets, a bolster, and I even have a chair. This seems to be one of the main props that people might need to improvise. If you have a chair nearby, you can go ahead and grab it. Otherwise, if you're in a room, maybe a bed would work well, or if you're in your living room, the side of the couch or the arm of the couch would be a good support. But I'll dive into how we're going to use that a little bit later in class as we progress. It's just a heads up that you want to have that nearby as well. We're going to get started sitting in swastikasana today. And you're going to want an extra blanket off to the side so that we can wrap our legs with it. I'm going to sit on a bolster to have a little bit of height. And then we'll grab a blanket. You can unfold it twice from shelf fold, kind of get this longer blanket, and then roll the long edge. Now here, when the legs are crossed, we'll have the legs or the feet walking underneath the thighs so that we're sitting more in a swastikasana, peaceful pose. And as you lift your knees up, we're going to wrap the blanket around the shins and where they cross. And then I can tuck the tail ends behind my legs and behind the calves. This is a wonderful way to support the legs, specifically if the inner thighs are quite tight and it's difficult to release that tension. So once you end up coming to a comfortable seated posture, take a smooth, steady inhale, smooth, steady exhale, using this time to draw your attention inward. As you rest your palms on the thighs, let the elbows bend slightly and hang towards the floor. With every inhale and exhale, there's a component of observing the body, maybe integrating a little bit more support or form so that the rest of the mind and the body can relax and be in a space of ease. With every inhale and every exhale, try to lift the upper outer corners of your chest. And at the same time, roll the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine, overall feeling as though the chest can become quite broad. As the chest lifts, the crown of the head starts to lift. Notice how your weight might be spreading on your sit bones. If you were to rock forward and back just slightly, observe how your weight might shift and see if you can come to a more neutral weight right in the middle of the sit bones. So we're not necessarily leaning forward with the abdomen out or the back rounding. We're not necessarily leaning back with the back and spine rounding to the wall behind us. But instead, as we sit in a more neutral space on the sit bones, you can lift the chest and lift the spine from there. On your next inhale, bring the hands together in Namaskar Asana, prayer pose. So elbows lift slightly. You'll feel the palms resting against each other. Try to use that gentle resistance between the palms to roll the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine. Notice if the thighs start to tense. Let's see if you can soften them, allowing the legs to release into the wrap around your legs, essentially allowing them to release down to the floor. We'll start class by chanting 3 ohms together as a group. And if you'd like, you're welcome to just listen. Let's start with an inhale. Notice if there was any tension that started to rise in the back of the neck, in the eyes, or the jaw. See if you can let that go, bringing the chin back to a neutral position, essentially floating parallel to the floor. As you inhale, keep the shoulders rolling back, chest broad. As you exhale, bring your chin down to the chest, surrendering the head to the heart, intellect to intuition. Rest the hands on the thighs. Slowly lift your head and open the eyes. Notice which leg is closest to you, and we'll switch the cross of the legs. Still using the wrap. Have the feet underneath the thighs. The knees come a little bit more in line with the hip sockets themselves as you wrap the shins. We'll begin class in Parvatasana today, a little mountain pose. You can go ahead and do this together. Start by lacing the fingers, and as you press the palms away, just notice what the shoulders are doing here before you take the arms up and overhead. Sometimes as we lift the hands up, the shoulders actually start to lift with the hands. But see if you can actually initiate that lift of the hands by rolling the tops of the shoulders back and down. If you feel any pinching or pain, you can go ahead and hold rather than continuing to deepen that lift of the arms. But as you take your arms directly above the shoulders, palms opening to the ceiling, see if you can maintain that roll, the tops of the shoulders back and down the spine. Just take a smooth, steady inhale and a smooth, steady exhale. Try to lift the side ribs, making the arms completely straight here. As you squeeze the elbows in towards each other, notice how the arms start to stretch. Then bring the hands down. Notice which pinky is on the loose end and switch the grasp of the fingers, pressing the palms away and taking the arms back up and overhead. Using that roll, the top of the shoulder back and down to initiate that. Just take a moment to notice, are the shoulders lifting up towards the ears? How can you create a little bit more space there? While the front of the body is lifting and rising, back of the body is descending and moving down to the floor. And then bring the hands back down, unlace the fingers, sitting nice and tall. You can uncross or unwrap your legs and grab some props for Adho Mukha Virasana. So what we're going to, I'll show the pose and then I'll show a couple of options with supporting it. Ultimately, you're going to want a bolster of some sort. I'm going to take my knees wide, toes come together. The inner edges of my toes are just kissing. They're not overlapping. Then I'm going to pull this bolster in. And as I lean forward, it's going to be quite a restful position. You can either rest the forehead on the forearms, or you could grab another blanket, place it under the forehead. Often what happens when we move into this position is that the hips start to lift off of the heels. If you take a couple breaths and you can manage to get the Hips down, wonderful. If not, if there still is some space there, then go ahead and grab a blanket and place it between the hips and the heels. Overall, we just want to have some contact between the sit bones and the heels so that the base of the spine can essentially anchor into something. So this is what we're going to use for support. Of course, you can improvise. If maybe you don't have enough blankets or a high enough bolster, you can grab your chair and just lean forward there on the chair. And a little bit of more upright position of Adho Mukha Virasana, the downward facing hero's pose. I also like to fold my blankets and place them on top of the bolsters. So you can do that as well. Once you come into Adho Mukha Virasana, take a couple of breaths and assess what you might need for support. You can start with the hands stretching out just to get some length in the spine, and then bending the elbows, resting the head on the arms. So we take a few breaths in Adho Mukha Virasana, knees wide, toes together as you lean forward. Just observe what's happening to the front of the body, to the back of the body. Sometimes we can approach our poses with more activity and more action. And then there are other times when it's beneficial just to rest. Allow that space to observe. Today in Adho Mukha Virasana, I'm not necessarily asking for you to do very much in the pose. Instead, we'll take this time to really just draw inward and observe. So often we're given instructions on how to hold poses and what to do, and that form can be helpful. It can be helpful to manage any tension in the low back or gripping in the neck that might come from bad posture. But we can also get carried away with just implementing action, just implementing what we're told. And instead, the real practice comes from observing. If we make these changes, what is actually happening in the body? And so as you rest here in Adho Mukha Virasana, give you some points of action to consider. But rather than just implementing them and then being done with the pose, as you implement those actions, notice what changes. At first, start to feel how your shins are resting on the floor. If your ankles are feeling tense or tender from this stretch, you can always add some support under the shins with the feet hanging off the back edge. But otherwise, really start to feel that span of skin and bone from the knee to the toe. It's resting on the floor. And as you start to press that shin, razor edge of the shin down into the floor, what changed? Notice how we can go from not doing anything with the legs to then actively starting to press the shins down. As you keep that gentle pressure of the shins down, take a nice deep exhale and sink your hips towards the heels. And let this be the anchor that your spine can grow from. And that growth of the spine is not necessarily very assertive. Instead, it comes more with the inhale, just a slight length in the side waists. But while that happens with your breath, notice how the base of the pose, the shins pressing down, the hips weighing heavy towards the heels, is still happening in the underlying actions of the pose. Now from here, we're going to come up into Adho Mukha Svanasana from Adho Mukha Virasana. You won't have to move many of your props. You can just take your hands forward, index finger points forward. As you lean into tabletop position, have your heels slightly back from the hips, wrists slightly forward from the shoulders, curl your toes under, and lift the hips up. Start with the heels lifted, thighs lifting very, very high. Notice the sharpness of the sit bones. So just as you were pressing the shins down and pulled your hips back into the heels, think about your sit bones now, aiming up towards the ceiling very sharply. With the heels lifted, it's not only the sit bones in the back of the leg that is lifting, but see if you can start to pull and press the top of your thigh back to the wall behind you. As the hips lift and pull back, notice how the side waists get long. Letting the head hang, your support may or may not, your support that you were using in Adho Mukha Virasana may or may not be tall enough for the head here in Adho Mukha Svanasana, but just assess. See if it is. And then we're going to come back into Adho Mukha Virasana. But be prepared as we come into Adho Mukha Svanasana again. We'll want some support under the head. So if you need more blankets to make that happen, since you just were in the pose, you can go ahead and grab them, have them nearby. But coming back into Adho Mukha Virasana, taking a few breaths here, shins pressing sharp into the floor. Now, there's a couple of different directions that we can actually even scrub the shins. Yes, we do want the shins to move directly into the floor, but see if you can start to actually scrub the shins forward towards your arms. And as you scrub the shins forward, notice how the abdomen draws in, tailbone tucks down. And just observe, see if you can scrub the shins back and forward, back and forward. Just coming in tune with what's changing muscularly as you do this. How would you make this happen in the legs? And how does that action affect the rest of the body when you do it? Gently lengthen your inhale and exhale. And then we'll come back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. If you need some more support for underneath the head, to support the head as you come up, then you can grab it. If your hands are slipping and you don't feel stable, then go ahead and take the space between your thumb and your index finger to a wall. Adho Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog with the head supported. So you start with the heels lifted. Notice how that can start to lift the hips, lift the sit bones up. And if you take your heels down any amount, make sure that you're maintaining that lift of the hips, lift of the thighs up. While the hands are pressing, just observe how much weight usually comes to the palms. Usually comes to really the base of the palm. See if you can drive and nail the knuckles of your fingers down into the floor so that it starts to spread that effort out. That from that base of the palm, the heel of the palm, there's almost this spreading towards the fingers as you start to nail the pressure of the knuckles down into the floor. Just like when we took the arms up and overhead earlier, notice if the tops of the shoulders are lifting towards the ears. And as you roll the shoulders back, making the upper back sharp, take the back ribs, back shoulder blades into the chest. The shoulder blades drive into the chest. You might start to notice that your chest and head come a little bit closer to the floor. Observe if the hips lost their lift. Observe how all of these points are affecting the body. And then you're going to walk the hands back, step the feet forward, wide-legged Uttanasana. So you can use the props to support underneath your hands if that's comfortable for you. We're going to add a little bit support in a moment. Right now, we're just coming out of Adho Mukha Svanasana into Uttanasana. Legs are wide, toes turn in. So take a few breaths here. Notice how your weight is resting on your feet. You can think about the front of the foot, the toe ball mounts, or the back of the foot, the heel. But we also have the inner heel and the outer heels. We also have the big toe ball mount or the pinky toe ball mount. So as you really start to identify and specify how your weight is resting on your feet, try to make it even between the inner and outer foot. And as the heel nails down, keep the sit bones lifting up high. Top of the thighs still pressing back as you charge the chest forward. Uttanasana. We're going to move into an Uttanasana that has the head supported. And so as you can see here with my support, I can let the head hang, but ultimately I do want there to be a little bit more lift. So I'm going to grab my chair. I'd recommend that you grab the support that you need in order to rest the head and the arms in a Ardha Uttanasana, half intense stretch pose. Still taking the feet a little bit wider than hip width apart, with the toes turned in slightly. And as you cross your arms and rest your forehead on your arms, the upper body should feel like it can descend towards the floor and it can start to relax. Legs are still active here. You can even lift the toes slightly, shifting the weight back to your heels. Notice how your weight might shift from inner heel to outer heel. Sometimes we can even feel if one leg is tighter than the other. As you work to straighten the legs, pressing the tops of the thighs back. Notice if there's a difference in the backs of the legs from left to right. Can you identify if there's anything different happening in your hips from left to right? Rather than just implementing these actions, try to feel the legs in their entirety. Not only is it the effort of the feet, ankles, and legs or thighs, but try to observe how all of those actions are affecting the other. Now there's this harmonious give and take. As we start to feel what these actions are actually doing to our body, we can identify what's happening and if there's any differences. As you gently lengthen and deepen your inhale and exhale, breathe into the sides of the rib cage. And then you can start to press yourself up, straightening the arms. And then coming into Tadasana, hands on the hips, standing tall. I know you can't fully see me right now, but that will change soon. We're going to move into Prasarada Padottanasana. So we'll take the legs wide and then move into Utthita Trikonasana. You can set your props aside since we will come back to them. I'm going to clear my mat off, and I have some blocks to support my hands. You can decide if that would be helpful for you and your pose. I'll show and demonstrate for those who might not know where we're headed, and then we'll do together. So you can step the feet wide, toes turn in slightly. We'll bend at the hips and come down into Prasarada Padottanasana. You can decide how much support you have under the hands. Just observe what the spine is doing. If it's rounding up towards the ceiling, might be best to have more support. If you feel like you can really start to drive the back shoulder blades into the chest, and maybe it's a little bit easier to hold that concave position, you can lower the blocks down comfortably, keeping the spine nice and long and concave. From here, we'll move into Utthita Trikonasana. I'm going to bend my right knee, pivot on the toes, take my hand to the outside of the leg and straighten the legs. For me, I could take my legs a little bit wider. Essentially, the stance will be about 4 to 4.5 feet wide. Utthita Trikonasana, turning up towards the ceiling. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you're welcome to lift the hand up. And then coming back down, bending that knee, coming around, turning the toes back forward, and then I'll do the other side. Pivoting on the toes, walk to the outside of the leg, Utthita Trikonasana. That's what we'll do today. As you come into Prasarada Padottanasana, toes turn in. You can adjust the support under your hands. Heels will be under the hips, wrists under the shoulders. Notice what's happening in the feet. Now that we've adjusted the legs, we have a little bit more space between the legs. Notice how that's changing the weight on your foot. Feeling how the inner heel and outer heel, big toe ball mount and pinky toe ball mount are all affected by the shift of the legs. As you pin that outer foot bone down, try to scrub the feet together. Even though the feet are pressing down, so they won't actually move, but as you try and scrub and squeeze the feet together, how does that change things muscularly in your legs? It almost feels as though you're trying to squeeze the thighs back to center. See if you can maintain that action as you press the thighs back, lift the chest forward. As you roll the caps of the shoulders to the back of the body, rolling the deltoid back to the spine, drive the shoulder blades forward into the chest. And we'll take our foot off to the right, so you can lift the heel, pivot on the toes, bring your block around, straightening both legs. Observe how much support is best for you to keep a lot of that concave back action. Might be a little bit different here in Utthita Trikonasana, but we still have the shoulder blades driving in, tops of the shoulders rolling back and down the spine. And as you press that right thigh away from your body, the chest is lifting up. You can even focus on pressing into that outer left heel. You take a few breaths here, turn the rib cage up to the ceiling, maybe even taking the gaze with it. And if you feel comfortable there, reach the left arm up and overhead. Just as we practiced in Prasarada Padottanasana, while the feet are pressing down, they won't actually move. See if you can actually scrub them towards each other. There's a different muscular resistance that comes with that. So you press evenly into the feet, scrubbing the feet towards each other. What changes? And then bringing that left hand down, bend the right knee, bring the block back forward and around to Prasarada Padottanasana. And adjust the feet back to the more aligned position. So the heels are in line with each other, big toes are in line with each other. And moving to the left side, lifting the heel, pivoting on the toe ball mounts, taking the block, the outer left foot. Take a smooth, deep, steady inhale and exhale. Breathe into the sides of the rib cage. While the right elbow pulls back and opens the chest towards the ceiling, think about how the legs can help you here. The legs straight, feet scrubbing in towards each other. Notice how the weight is sitting on your foot. How is the weight on the inner and outer heel? And if you feel comfortable, reach the right arm up and overhead. Utthita Trikonasana. Back ribs driving into the chest, tops of the shoulders rolling back. And observe the body as an entire unit here. And bringing that hand down, bending the left knee, arms come forward. And walk your blocks forward so the arms get nice and long, head starts to hang. As you inhale and exhale, fill the sides of the rib cage. See if you can start to breathe into the back of the body, back of the ribs. But then notice as you breathe into the front of the body, start to lift the abdomen up towards the chest. And there's a little bit more length that can come. And try to keep that length as you bring your hands back underneath the shoulders. And we'll do each side one more time. So turning the right toes out, block comes to the outside of the foot. Utthita Trikonasana. The left elbow pulls back, turn the rib cage up towards the ceiling. Notice what's happening between the left and the right shoulder blades. Often that right shoulder blade, it's easy for it to slip away from the spine. See if we can drive shoulder blades in together towards the chest. Then reach the left arm up and overhead. Scrubbing the feet towards each other. As you press the right thigh down, lift the chest and side waist away from that right thigh. And then bringing the hand down, right hand forward, Prasarada Padottanasana. Expanded, intense stretch of the foot. And turning the left toes out, heel comes in, hand comes out to the side of the ankle. Pull the right elbow back. Notice how open that right side of the chest gets. Can you mimic that action? And as you draw the left shoulder blade into the spine, can you create that on the left side of the body? And pressing the feet down, scrubbing the feet towards each other. As you press the left thigh away from your body, lift the left side waist. Eventually, we might move deeper and deeper into the pose, taking the hand closer to the floor. But the whole time, we want to feel that there's this lift and space between the left thigh and the left side waist. And if you feel comfortable doing so, reach the right arm up and overhead. Bringing the hand down. Hands come forward, toes turn forward. Prasarada Padottanasana. And heel toe step the feet together. A wide-legged Uttanasana, intense stretch pose. So toes turn in, feet are a little bit wider than the hips. Cross the forearms and let the head hang. We've talked about a couple of points and a couple of places in the body. Just apply which ones have stood out to you most today. Which ones seem to build and support a reflective nature in your own body? And then take your hands on your hips, come up to stand. You can set the blocks aside, grab some blankets to sit on. You want to sit high enough so that it's comfortable to sit up nice and tall with the legs straight in front of you. Anywhere from 2 to 4 blankets. If you're very familiar with sitting with the legs straight, maybe even 1 blanket will be enough for you today, but you'll have to assess your own body. And we'll turn the blanket stack so that we're sitting on the corner, as if trying to mimic a bicycle seat. Sit bones are supported, but the legs can shift from side to side. I'll start just by sitting with the legs straight. Dandasana, staff pose. As you sit up nice and tall, just notice if your low back feels any tension or if you need to adjust any support under your hips. Taking a few breaths here, lift the chest up nice and tall. And we're gonna start in Marichyasana. So I can show and then we'll do together. I'll bend my right knee, bring my foot in as close as I can to the hip as long as the knee is comfortable. As I sit up nice and tall, let's start with Marichyasana 1, twisting into an open twist, so away from the bent knee. Taking a few breaths here. And then we'll come back through center, move into a more of a closed twist. Marichyasana 3. As I twist, I want to open up the back of the body, so allowing there to be some spreading and openness across the upper back. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you can even try and hook that arm to the outside of the thigh, although this is not necessary to get that broadening sensation. So you can check and see if that's part of your practice for today. And then we'll come back to center and do the other side. Okay. Let's go ahead and start by bending the right knee in. You can pull the foot in as long as the knee is comfortable, making sure that the right foot is flat to the floor. Now, even though that left foot is not pressing onto anything specifically, imagine as if it was. Imagine as if you were standing on it. And we still want to distribute our weight and our pressure evenly from the inner heel to the outer heel. We still want the foot to be slightly flexed as if we're standing on it, driving the big toe ball mount away. And then start to twist off to your left towards that straight leg. And as you take a few breaths here, you can use that hook of your forearm on the knee, on the shin, to draw the shoulder blade back on the right side of the body. So we take that left arm around. It's usually a little easier to open up the left side of the chest. Notice what's happening to the right side waist. You press the right foot down. Try to sink your right hip into the floor, into the blankets. And with the anchoring of that right hip, lift the chest up. Try to lift that right side waist more, so that you're creating space between the right hip and the right armpit. And as you do this, just observe what's happening in your body. Although you might contemplate these actions and be able to implement it from the contemplation, see if you can actually observe how it's affecting the rest of your pose. How is it affecting the rest of your spine or your legs? If you feel comfortable doing so, lift your chin, look over the left shoulder. Marichyasana 1. And then coming back through center. Now twisting towards the bent knee. Moving into Marichyasana 3. You can start just by hooking that elbow around the front of the right shin. And even here, you'll probably start to feel a little bit more of a spreading across the upper back. Even though the upper back is broadening, it's not to feed a collapsing of the chest forward. You still want there to be a lot of space between the collarbones so the chest is still broad. And if it's ready for your practice today, you can take the elbow, hook it to the outside of the thigh, and try to close the gap. Notice how there might be some space between the side waist and the thigh when you twist deep, and see if you can close that. Essentially walking that thigh all the way up your left arm when you hook. And if you feel comfortable doing so, lift the chin, look over the right shoulder, taking some deep inhales into the back of the body. Let go of any tension in the face or the eyes. And then come back to center. Straightening the legs, Dandasana, staff pose. Do the other side. So bend the left knee in. Pull the heel in close to the hip. And starting in Marichyasana 1, twisting off towards the straight leg. This is more of an open twist here. Often as we twist off to the right, that left hip likes to lift up. As you press the left foot down, see if you can also sink into the left hip. And create space between the left sit bone and the left armpit. So there's this, not only a lifting of the chest, but it's all in coordination with an anchoring of that left hip and left sit bone. And if you feel comfortable doing so, lift your chin, look over the right shoulder, Marichyasana 1. Shoulders roll back. And as the hips weigh down, lift the chest up. Notice what's happening in the right foot, the foot of that straight leg. Try to press the toe ball mount, inner heel away from you. And then coming back to center. Moving into the closed twist, Marichyasana 3. Can you just hook the elbow around the shin? This is plenty deep of a twist on its own. If you feel comfortable doing so, you can also hook the arm to the outside of that thigh. And as you inhale and exhale, feel the sides of the ribs, backs of the ribs. Let there be this broadening in the back of the body. But we want that broadening to be in harmony with openness in the chest. So we don't want the back to overpower the chest. We don't want the chest lift to overpower the effort in the back. See if you can find a nice balance between those actions. If you feel comfortable doing so, lift your chin, look over the left shoulder. Every exhale, the belly drains. If you can twist a little bit deeper. Allow your exhale to linger slightly. And soften any subconscious tension that might rise in the face, jaw, or throat. And then coming back to center, sitting with the legs straight. And we'll take the legs wide. Upavista Konasana, expanded angle pose. You can take your hands forward and start to walk your hands forward a little bit. It's not necessarily your maximum quite yet. As you walk the hands forward, just observe what's happening to the front of the body and the back of the body. Often here, it's easy to round the back. Back can become more broad, which is good. See if you can maintain that as you press the thighs down and lift the chest up. Roll the shoulders back and down the spine. Even though the back of the body is quite broad, so the shoulder blades are driving in towards the chest. And with every inhale and every exhale, do this cycle of action and try and take your hands forward. So inhaling, pressing the thighs down, lifting the chest. As you exhale, abdomen draws into the spine. Roll the shoulders back. See if you can move a little bit deeper. So the inhale is a lift. Thighs press down, chest lifts up. Exhale, abdomen draws in, shoulder blades draw back, and you lean forward a little bit deeper. So every breath you take, see if you can move a little bit deeper into the pose. And once you've hit your maximum, observe what's happening in the legs, what's happening in the feet. As you press your outer thighs down, backs of your thighs down, instead of weighing so heavy onto the inner thigh, try to press through the inner heel and big toe ball mount. And let the head hang. With every inhale and every exhale, just observe your practice and your body today. What points, which instructions seem to be most helpful for you? Sometimes the goal is to be more supported. Maybe it's to move a little bit deeper into the pose with comfort and ease. Let's see if today you can access a place where the mind becomes calm. Where we're not trying so hard that it becomes disturbing. We're also not trying so little that the mind gets distracted by other things. Instead, we want to find that nice balance of effort. And there's enough effort in the body to keep the mind anchored and aware of the present moment, but it's also attainable. So we're not feeling that there's this ache or effort. There's a window where we can access some effortless effort. And then walking the hands back towards yourself, sitting up nice and tall. We'll bring the legs into Baddha Konasana. So you can hook underneath the knee and lift the knee straight up to the ceiling. As you hook the ankle, take the knee out to the side. Or if you're used to coming in and out of Baddha Konasana, you can always just swing the ankle in, bringing the feet together, knees wide. Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. And as you sit up nice and tall, think about that similar effort in the upper body that you felt while in Upavista Konasana, expanded angle pose. Now, while we're in Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose, you can observe how your feet, you can even look down at your feet and notice how the pressure of your feet rests against one another. Just like we've been practicing in class today, want the inner and outer foot to have some even pressure and extension. As the inner heels stretch towards each other, can you notice the big toe ball mounts stretch towards each other? Rather than one or the other overpowering, see if it can be even from left to right. Even if you can encourage some symmetry, harmony. Although the feet will be different, even as you look at them, they might look slightly different. Let's see if you can actively extend evenly from the inner heel and the big toe ball mount. And take your hands forward slightly. Again, it doesn't have to be your maximum quite yet. As you keep the big toe ball mounts pressing in towards each other, notice how the top of the thigh, really the top of the inner groin, can deepen as you lift the chest and lift the side waists. Maybe you move a little bit deeper, maybe not. But prioritize that lift in the side waists, roll of the shoulders back. and pressure of the big toe ball mounts. With every inhale and every exhale, you might feel like you can move a little bit deeper. Let the head hang. And eventually start to move into your maximum. Let that maximum be a place of effortless effort. And although there is effort to support you to be in the pose, there's a sense of attainability, effortlessness, enough effort to focus the mind into the body, into the present moment, but it's accessible, it's achievable enough that there's an effortlessness, that the mind and the face can be soft, the head can hang. As the head hangs, feel how the back of the neck gets long. And then you'll use your hands to press yourself back up, sitting up nice and tall. And bring the legs together. And we'll set up for Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. So to form a bridge pose, what you'll need is a bolster or a stack of blankets. I have a pretty tall bolster, but if I didn't have my bolster, I would unfold my blankets once from shelf fold and then fold them in half lengthwise. And so you can essentially start to make your own bolster. This doesn't have to be very high. It also can depend on how many props that you have around yourself. Even when I stack 2 blankets, it's a pretty significant ledge. The shoulders will be on the floor while the back ribs are on the blanket. So if you have enough props to do this, then great. If you have even just 1 blanket, that's absolutely fine. Again, it doesn't have to be very much support today, just enough to create a little bit of lift in the ribs and the chest. So if you're familiar with where we're headed, then you can go ahead and move into it. Otherwise, I'll demonstrate really quickly. So I'm going to start sitting on my blankets. And as I lay back, initially, my shoulders are still on the blanket stack. I'm going to press my elbows into the floor, draw my shoulders onto my spine, and then just centimeter by centimeter, I'm going to start to curl my shoulders over that edge of the blanket, and eventually the tops of the shoulders come to the floor. You can rest your arms either in this goal post or hold them up position or along the side waists, whichever is most comfortable for you. And then from here, I'm going to straighten my legs. Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. You can even let go of everything, everywhere. The low back tends to ache, and it might be best to remove some support under the back or keep the legs active. I'm going to try to keep the legs active at first, and if the aching still doesn't dissipate, then we would remove some support under the back. Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. And then to come off, you can push yourself off the blankets a little bit more, lift the hips, and then shift the blankets out from underneath you so that the spine is flat on the floor. And then we'll roll to the side and move on. So Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. As you get your props set up, whenever you're ready, you can come into the pose. When seated on your blanket stack, have the feet flat on the floor and the knees bent. And then hands behind the hips slightly. You can bend the elbows, come down to elbows. As you spread the elbows apart, we're laying down on the blanket stack. And we have support all along the way as we come down. From here, press your elbows down into the floor. Try to roll the tops of your shoulders, the caps of the shoulders, onto the back of the body. You're going to maintain that action as you just ever so slightly, centimeter by centimeter, start to push yourself off the blanket stack, but it's just to curl the shoulders over the edge of that bolster or blanket stack. We're only moving to the point where the tops of the shoulders come to the floor, and you should feel like the bottom tips of the shoulder blades are supported by your bolster or blanket stack here. Before straightening the legs, press the feet into the floor and give a tuck of your tailbone. So with a deep exhale, Feet pressed down, tailbone tucks towards the calves, and then straighten the legs. You can decide which position is most comfortable for you with the arms. And as you take a few breaths here, you can start with the heels pressing into the floor, toes pointing up towards the ceiling. And if your body feels comfortable in this position, go ahead and let go of everything, everywhere. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, let go of any subconscious tension that might have risen, perhaps in the eyes, space between the eyebrows. Notice if the lips or the jaw is holding on to any tension that can be released and let go of. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, take a moment to feel gratitude for your body. Feel grateful that you have the opportunity to practice and focus on your body and yoga at this time. As we acknowledge that everything is relative. Some people are not so lucky to be able to practice. Maybe they're not so lucky to be able to draw their mind inward. But we are, as you're able to turn inward, still the fluctuations of your consciousness, of your mind. Allow a sense of peace to come from that, of gratitude that we are very fortunate to have that opportunity. As you observe your body as an entire unit, notice which areas are sharp in the mind, which areas are easy for your mind to gravitate towards. Then take some time to observe the areas that are dull. Where are the spaces in your body your mind doesn't necessarily go to, where there's not sensation or very little? As you tune in to the sound of your inhale and exhale, feel how your breath moves through the body. And then to come out of this pose, bend your knees, the feet flat on the floor, and start to push yourself off the blanket stack a little bit. And if your mat is sticky, lift the hips up, push the blankets off to the side, and then rest your hips back on the floor so that the spine is flat, so that the hips and the rib cage are on the same level. After taking a breath here, reach your arm up and overhead, roll to your right side, and press yourself up. Come to a comfortable seated posture. As you sit nice and tall with the hands in Namaskar, feel free to use the props around you to sit comfortably. I appreciate you all for taking the time to practice yoga today. Thank you for practicing with me. Namaste. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's sequence. We did end in a little bit more of a supported back bend since it is still the morning and we have the rest of the day to go. If you feel more comfortable taking a Shavasana, please go ahead and do so and take that opportunity. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend and have a good day. Bye. Thanks for being here.